Hello everyone, this is Mr. Timulak, and this is going to be the first in a series of screencasts that's going to walk you through from beginning to end of our next project, the Edgelit sign project. Starting off here on our Canvas page, and I'll continue to add resources as we move through the project. Currently, you can see a brief introduction, pictures of two products you can choose to make. The one on the left is the pedestal design, and our design brief is asking us to build a prototype sign, but we'll qualify this too if someone wants to make sort of a necklace pendant version of it. So this link here is the cut files for that version. Okay. So this screencast is largely going to focus on making your CAD model. But before we jump into that, let's just check in real quick with the design brief for this project, which I handed out in class. But I just wanted to look at the deliverables, meaning what you have to turn in. A finished functioning prototype featuring an original design in the lighted portion. Realistic photo rendered printout of the product so the customer can visualize the final product. A cross-sectional drawing. So that the customer can source the correct parts for it, and a completed CAD assembly. Okay. So most of these items depend on having a CAD assembly, so that's what we're going to focus on first, how to make the CAD model. Okay, here is our finished CAD model. And what's going to be different about this project is, or at least in the way that we model it, is we're going to take a different approach than we normally do. Okay. Normally, we're used to starting a sketch, some 2D sketch, and adding features such as extrusions, right, to make objects. Oh. Okay. But what's different here is we're not really, this thing's already been designed, but we only have these things. We only have vector copies of the cut files. And what we're really going to be doing here is reverse engineering. Since we have these cut files, we're going to try to reproduce the 3D models that they're based on, but I don't have the CAD model for it. So in addition, though, this technique is really useful because you're familiar with vector files. You use them for laser cutting, and you know you can download anything off the internet, and it may be a vector file already, or you could convert it to a vector file with Inkscape. But we could use these vector files then to actually create 3D objects out of them, right? So think like about logos, right? You'll be able to cut out like any logo you can think of, or any kind of icons. So how do we do this? We do it as it's done, how this would be fabricated for real. Like a laser is going to cut these shapes out of some stock. So we're going to create some wood stock, right? Meaning the piece of wood first, and then we're going to use these kind of as a cookie cutter to cut those shapes out of that wood. Okay, so first thing is I'm going to start a new design. And I am going to start with a sketch like we normally do, but I'm just going to make a slab of wood here. And I'm going to model it after the pieces we've been using, which are 12 inches by 12 inches. So they're 1 square foot boards. And they happen to be, I'm going to extrude this now, 1/8 inch thick. So we can press 1 divided by 8, we can actually type the fraction in, and it'll do the math. Or you can put in 0.125 inches. Okay. We're going to also want to focus more than ever on correct materials in this model. So I'm going to go ahead right away and add the material we need to this. I'm going to come up here to the design tree and right click on the very top, which is sort of the container for this whole part, and I'm going to go to appearance, and there's a bunch of folders of different materials. If I scroll down, there's one for wood, Doesn't matter really which kind of wood you use. I'm going to do, I think, oak. Right? I can drag and drop it right onto the object, or I could come up here and drag it onto the part name, and it will add that appearance. Okay. Now I want to use this cut file that I have. I want to import that and lay it on top of the piece of wood, and then use it to do an extrude cut and cut away everything else but that. So to do that, we have a button here right on our ribbon that says Insert, and one of the choices is to insert an SVG, and that is a vector file. That is the file extension for vector files. So we'll select it. You're going to navigate to wherever you have downloaded it from Canvas. Okay, and then it wants me to next click on where do I want to place that. I'm going to click right on the top of this piece of wood because that's where I want to place it. Okay, and if I scroll out, it's on top of the piece of wood, but it's down here in the corner. Okay, or at least it's in the same plane. So the first thing I'm going to do is grab the square right here. I'm going to move it over to maybe anywhere in the wood. And as we can see, it's kind of too small. And without going into too many details, I noticed it's about a factor of 5 too small. So in our menu that appears when we're using the Insert SVG tool, there is a box here where we can add a scaling factor, and we're going to scale it. Oops, scale it. Okay. Oop. A little bit off. So it's scaled up correctly, but just got to move it a little bit. So select it, go to Move. It does not want to move. So I'm going to go to the old reliable, undo, start over real quick here, insert SVG. I want to place it a little bit better. So I'm going to go ahead and move it a little more to the right so it doesn't go off the edge like it just did. Scale that by 5 again. Okay, there. Okay, so I'm going to use these basically as cookie cutters, and we'll sort of reverse cookie cutters. I'm going to cut everything but that away. So we're finished with our sketch here. Click Finish, and we're going to use the Extrude tool. Remember, we use extrudes a lot to create material, but you can also use the same tool to cut or remove material. So we're going to change the operation here in our extrude menu to cut. Okay, and we want to think about clicking on the things we want to cut away. So obviously all this extra outside wood, I'll click, right, and that's going to be extruded away. I also would want this center slot to be extruded away. This center slot, of course, the holes we want to be extruded away. So you have to click them all to select them. Uh-oh. Okay, so you can tell by the color here, I clicked on the wrong part of it. And I clicked again there. I think that'll bring it back. And that hole, and this one. I think I got everything. So I'm going to grab my extrude arrow and just kind of push down to cut it away. Kind of arbitrary distance because I'm going to come over here to what's called the extent. Right? And this is a tool that helps us dictate how far we can cut or extrude. And I'm going to choose all because I want it to go through everything. And okay. All right. So there we go. In one fell swoop, we have made all of these parts at once. And they're exactly like the cut files. But now they're 3D objects. Now, of course, the next thing we want to do is we do want to move them around and assemble them. But before we can do that, we have to turn each of these things into individual components. Because it came from one piece of wood, the program thinks it's still one thing. It doesn't see it as 4 different things like you see it. So to help it understand, we come over here to this bodies menu. Okay, any sort of 3D shape is considered a body, but it's not an individual part until we right-click on it and from the menu select Create Components from Bodies. Okay, now you can see that body disappeared, and down here I have a component, and it's a good idea to name these. Something that makes sense. I wasn't paying attention to which one I just did. So this one is, I'm going to call this piece the outer. So I'll double click on there and I can call it the outer piece. Okay, that's the base. So create component. I think it was that one. That's base. Oh, that's right. If you hover over it, it highlights it. So this one that I missed or forgot to name, double click that. That's the inner piece. Okay. Okay, and notice the icon changed. It doesn't. It's not that little cylinder anymore. It is now this cube, which means it's a component. And what's important about that is it now has its own origin system, and that's necessary for it to exist on its own, to be able to be moved and assembled, so it can understand relationships to anything else. Okay, by having its own origin system, that's what makes it a unique piece now. Okay, so this is going to be the end of our first screencast. If you got through all this in a period, that would be a day well spent. So hope you have a good day, and I'll see you for the next screencast.